Hey everybody, welcome to episode 3 of my series on Neal Stephenson. It's a rant / reading time. This one's going to be much more of a rant because I'm not going to read much from this book. But we get now into these kind of colourful books in the rack here. You can easily tell that it's a series of 4 that kind of sit together. Well, this is the first one. Cryptonomicon. I just barely have the words to encapsulate how much I love this book. I've read this, as I said in episode 1, there are certain of Neal Stephenson's books which I've read maybe a dozen times. Well, this is the one that I've read the most. It's absolutely mind-bogglingly good. And it basically... How can I tackle this? In the books that we looked at previously, the previous 10 out of 10 ones, Snow Crash and The Diamond Age, Neal Stephenson just travels into the future and talks about the implications of technology. And it seems like at a certain point he got into his head that that's all well and good, talking about the future implications of technology. He could do that with his hands tied behind his back, evidently, and have a lot of fun doing it. But why not go back into history and start looking at the origins of technology? So this book takes place in 2 different time zones. The first is when he was writing it in the mid-90s, and the advent of the internet, in the advent of even things like digital currency, which is a thing that has come to the fore since he wrote this book. Things like Bitcoin, obviously. But to go further back in time, it takes us back to World War II, and you can see the little image there of the explosion, the iconic explosion around Pearl Harbor and America's entry into the world. But crucially, absolutely crucially, the efforts by the Allies to decode and decrypt the communications of the Axis powers, and all that implied. And basically Neal Stephenson's sort of argument, and I don't think he came up with it by himself, but it's what he lays out in this book, is that was the event, that was the primum mobile, or the catalyst that led to the invention of the digital computer, or the sort of the final pieces that fell into place, because we'll get to these books shortly, and they go further back in time. But yeah, the moment when the Allies, particularly the British, particularly under Alan Turing, were adopting technology and making radical leaps and bounds in computing technology to tackle the problem of decoding the Germans and the Japanese encryption. It's just so good, so good. So what kind of people in both of those timelines, in the 90s and in World War II, what kind of people does it take to achieve these ends? This is the kind of thing that he explores, and he explores it on both ends. He explores the nerdy, geeky types, but he also explores the roughneck type of thugs that are required as the thin end, the point of the spear when the what's the word? The rubber hits the road. They actually have to get in there and do some bloody fighting, which is always what we thought war was, and we were basically right. But come World War II, there's a whole other element of war, and that's technological or digital prowess, being able to outflank intellectually and in terms of your software and computing technology, completely new words, completely new concepts, being able to outflank your enemy in that regard. So the nerd, the pencil-necked, that's me maybe, the pencil-necked nerd is the one who ultimately was the most important in defeating the enemy. It obviously the tough guy the tough Marine, the tough infantry guy was super important and super heroic, absolutely essential. Like if you didn't have those guys, you were stuffed, obviously. But suddenly, come the 20th century, you needed this new type of warrior as well, an intellectual warrior in the digital landscape. Okay, that's brilliant stuff. Enough ranting. Let's do a little bit of reading, and really a little bit, because that's enough of a plot line, right? That's enough of a plot line. It's exciting enough. But what makes Neal Stephenson so amazing is just the sheer exuberance and just sheer richness of the writing. He's so good. He's so good. And in those books I described before, he had fun. He was having fun. All of a sudden he ascends to this higher levels of writing prowess. He takes all those tricks, all those strange angular ways to introduce characters and scenarios, and he applies it to the historical novel. Oh boy, it's fun. So let's read a tiny part where he introduces the character of Lawrence. Lawrence, who's the pencil neck type that I'm describing, the American version of the Alan Turing, let's say. Fictional version of Alan Turing. All right, one more time. Can you give myself a little sip of water to begin? Keep the vocal folds a little hydrated. Okay, here we go. This is a short bit. But just listen to the way he introduces. It's part of the introduction of the character. It's talking about the boyhood of the character, but it's also talking about the mental development. That's all I'm going to say. The mental development of this character. Just the angle that he chooses on this. Check it out. The boy had a peculiar relationship with sound. When a fire engine passed, he was not troubled by the siren's howl or the bell's clang. But when a hornet got into the house and swung across the ceiling in a broad lizajou, droning almost inaudibly, he cried in pain at the noise. And if he saw or smelled something that scared him, he would clap his hands over his ears. So if he saw or smelled something that scared him, he would clap his hands over his ears. One noise that troubled him not at all was the pipe organ in the chapel at Bolger Christian College. The chapel itself was nothing worth mentioning, but the organ had been endowed by the paper mill family and would have sufficed for a church 4 times the size. It nicely complemented the organist, a retired high school math teacher who felt that certain attributes of the Lord, violence and capriciousness in the Old Testament, majesty and triumph in the New Testament, could be directly conveyed into the souls of the impued sinners through a kind of frontal sonic impregnation. Excuse me. That he ran the risk of blowing out the stained-glass windows was of no consequence, since no one liked them anyway, and the paper mill fumes were gnawing at the interstitial lead. But after one little old lady too many staggered down the aisle after a service, reeling from tinnitus, and made a barbed comment to the minister about the exceedingly dramatic music, the organist was replaced. Nevertheless, he continued to give lessons on the instrument. Students were not allowed to touch the organ until they were proficient at the piano, and when this was explained to Lawrence Pritchard Waterhouse, he taught himself in 3 weeks how to play a Bach fugue, and signed up for organ lessons. Since he was only 5 years old at the time, he was unable to reach both the manuals and the pedals, and had to play standing, or rather strolling, from pedal to pedal. When Lawrence was 12, the organ broke down. That paper mill family had not left any endowment for maintenance, so the math teacher decided to have a crack at it. He was in poor health and required a nimble assistant. Lawrence, who helped him open up the hood of the thing He was in poor health and required a nimble assistant, Lawrence, who helped him open up the hood of the thing. For the first time in all those years, the boy saw what had been happening when he was pressing those keys. For each stop, each timbre, or type of sound that the organ could make, viz., blockflöte, trumpet, piccolo, there was a separate row of pipes, arranged in a line from long to short. Long pipes made low notes, short, high. The tops of those pipes defined a graph, not a straight line, but an upward tending curve. The organist slash math teacher sat down with a few loose pipes, a pencil and paper, and helped Lawrence figure out why. When Lawrence understood, it was as if the math teacher had suddenly played the good part of Bach's Fantasia and Fugue in G minor on a pipe organ the size of the spiral nebula in Andromeda, the part where Uncle Johann dissects the architecture of the universe in one merciless, descending, ever-mutating chord, as if his foot is thrusting through skidding layers of garbage until it finally strikes bedrock. In particular, the final steps of the organist's explanation were like a falcon's dive through layer after layer of pretense and illusion, thrilling or sickening or confusing depending on what you were. The heavens were riven open. Lawrence glimpsed choirs of angels ranking off into geometrical infinity. The pipes sprouted in parallel ranks from a broad, flat box of compressed air. All of the pipes for a given note, but belonging to different stops, lined up with each other along one axis. All of the pipes for a given stop, but tuned at different pitches, lined up with each other along the other, perpendicular axis. Down there in the flat box of air, then, was a mechanism that got air to the right pipes at the right times. When a key or pedal was depressed, all of the pipes capable of sounding the corresponding note would speak as long as their stops were pulled out. Mechanically, all of this was handled in a fashion that was perfectly clear, simple, and logical. Lawrence had supposed that the machine must be at least as complicated as the most intricate fugue that could be played on it. Now he had learnt that a machine, simple in its design, could produce results of infinite complexity. Stops were rarely used alone. They tended to be piled on top of each other in combinations that were designed to take advantage of the available harmonics. More tasty mathematics here. Certain combinations in particular were used over and over again. Lots of block flutes on varying lengths for the quiet, offertory, for example. The organ included an ingenious mechanism called a preset, which enabled the organist to select a particular combination of stops he himself had chosen instantly. He would punch a button and several stops would bolt out from the console, driven by pneumatic pressure, and in that instant the organ would become a different instrument with entirely new timbres. Okay. I hope that piqued your interest. That's an introduction to just one of the characters, and without giving anything away, a crucial moment in their mental development. But if you didn't enjoy my reading of it, I hope that won't put you off. You should definitely read this book, Cryptonomicon. It's an amazing primer into cryptology, cryptography, and how that phenomenon figured into the history of the Second World War and how it figured into the history of the advent of the internet, the implications of it going deep into our current situation where we're facing the advent of the blockchain. So sort of digital currency, unforgeable digital currency. There's other things about blockchain that are coming, but essentially it's an unforgeable digital ledger, right? This is this shows the sort of the original prime moving parts that set these events in motion. And it's wonderful. It's wonderful. But it's not just the technological aspects. It's also the human psychological aspects. I love the way he will take a character who seems normal, or normal's the wrong word, kind of just a flawed human, and with all of their down or shortfalls mentally or spiritually, and he shows how through their emotional journey or their growth, they can end up, in spite of their human flaws and failings, enacting heroism and massive outsized contributions to the journey of humanity. That's one of the things he achieves in this and so many other of his books, and that's inspiring to me. I find that very, very inspiring. Not that I aspire to achieve grandiose goals in life, but even just in the mundane, I get a lot of inspiration from reading these types of stories. Again, I don't aspire to being part of global conflicts or anything like that, but just in the day to day, yeah, just that message is a strong and potent and visceral one. We are flawed humans, but we have an opportunity to do good in the world just by acting well and looking for those opportunities and keeping going. Well, there we go. So the final message, in it, whatever my take has done, whether it's put you off, I hope not, or whether it's inspired you, the message remains: read Cryptonomicon. Thanks. And now I'm going to hunt down the stop button. Okay, cheerio.